Today in Matt's class, we are going to talk about how to draw the female body. So in the last video, I talked about how to draw the male body. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with drawing the female body. We're going to go through all these steps, but there are some specific things you can do right from the get-go that's going to make your female body a little bit more feminine and not as masculine as we have over here. So the first thing that we're doing, I'm using the orange marker to draw lightly. We are going to start with the stick figure, the gesture, the skeletal structure, whatever you call it. But in starting with this stick figure, right from the get-go, we are going to have some body language that is going to instantly make our stick figure unmistakably feminine. Here we go. So we start with the head, which is the cranium and the mandible. I'm going to start up here. So that is the same. We shave a little bit off the side so it's a little bit less bulbous. Here is one of the biggest differences right from the get-go. Even though male skeletons and female skeletons are nearly identical, it's actually really hard for people to tell the difference. But when we're living inside of us, the way women carry themselves is a lot different from a male. So like right now, the way I'm standing, the way James is standing, we have even weight distributed on both of our feet. Rarely are we just like a hip out to one side like this. We usually are kind of standing pretty even keel like so. In general, guys are kind of boring. We kind of stand and walk like gorillas, and we kind of just walk like this, and when someone calls our name, we kind of turn around, we're like, what? You know? We just have kind of this even Steven thing. We're kind of straight and narrow. Women are curvy, and the way they carry themselves is very slinky, and there's just a lot of curve going on. So when you're drawing the spine, instead of drawing this straight line down like this, usually there's kind of like a C curve or an S curve going on. So often you'll have something kind of like this. Doesn't have to be super dramatic, but something like that. Then with the shoulders, rarely are the shoulders straight across. A lot of times when I'm in a full classroom, I'm looking around at all of the gents, and they're usually sitting perfectly like this, you know, taking notes at their table. And then when I look at the ladies, you know, usually one shoulder is kind of up a little bit and one shoulder's down. And after they're sketching this way for a while, then they kind of switch and they do this kind of thing. So because in this case, I've got the spine curving like this, that instantly is going to make the shoulders kind of angle somewhat like that. Now, when idealizing the male figure, we talked about broadening the shoulders. You do the opposite with the ladies. And instead of having, I mean, in real life, the shoulders are, yes, 2 heads wide, but we can bring that in just a little bit and just a little bit, just to kind of idealize the female figure like so. Next up, we've got our barrel-shaped rib cage, which is going to be on the inside. Now here's what happens with the ladies. Automatically, to kind of have this balance going, if this shoulder goes up, this shoulder goes down automatically without being able to help it. If this shoulder goes down, this hip actually kind of kicks up slightly. And then when you switch, it kind of does this kind of thing when you're standing there. The same happens when you're walking. So if you've ever watched America's Top Model and you've learned how Miss J teaches the ladies how to do the walk, you'll notice what they're doing is, and it's hard for me to do because I normally don't walk this way except on Friday evenings. Shh, don't tell anyone. What happens is usually, I have to think about it though. If this hip is up and then this shoulder is down like this, you're switching and then it's kind of a, yeah, something like that.
You gotta do the bow.
Do you know, James, can you do it? No. Do you know how to? Give me the what? There you go. Oh yeah, all right. Yeah, give me some more shoulder though and hip. A little more shoulder and hip. Oh, there we go. And come back towards the camera. Hip, more hip and shoulder. Yeah, oh yeah, there you go. That's exactly what. So what we want to do automatically, regardless if she's sitting down, if she's standing up, if she's walking, if these shoulders go like this, That means the hips are going to go kind of kitty corner, counteractive like so. Actually, these can go up a little bit higher. Now, the hips are the opposite. Again, the hips are usually as wide as the shoulders. When drawing women, you can do the opposite. You can make the hips a little bit wider. Now, I know a lot of the ladies usually say, no, I don't want my hips wider. But actually, scientifically, it's a scientific proven thing. This goes to like caveman times and stuff. Again, this is me not trying to like, I don't know. I hope this doesn't sound chauvinistic or something weird like that, but this is just what you hear in the industry, and men are all about the childbearing hips. I'm just saying, so a lot of times to idealize the figure, this is what we're doing. So it's okay to make the hips just a little bit wider. Now, here's what happens. When this hip is angled up like this, what that means, if this hip goes out like that, all of the weight is on this leg with that going up like that. Here's the cool thing. When you're drawing your characters, you want to make it look like they have balance. I'll stop standing like that for a second. I'm not used to it. You need to have a balance. So have you ever done a drawing before where like the drawing's pretty good, except it looks like your person's about to fall over or something like that? Obviously that's no good. One of the cool things about this, when you've got this hip, this shoulder down, this hip is kicked up, if you were to draw a line straight down from the head, that will go right to the bottom of this foot right here, because that foot is carrying all of the weight. This foot is just holding the balance, but see, you could actually lift this foot up, and that's what happens. Then if you switch to this side like this, now that this hip is kicked out, if you were to draw a line straight down from my head, it would go right to that foot right there. So watch what happens. See how we have our head here? We're gonna take this femur, we're gonna swing it over like this. Here's our foot. See how you bring that straight down? Boom, there's that foot right there. Then this leg is just holding the balance. Something like so. Now we're gonna have, you know what? Even though this already is looking very feminine, let's go ahead and give her some tood. Right? And even though this is a very kind of tough pose, if you could see, James, everyone has to see what you just did. That was perfect. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Even though there's some attitude here, this is definitely feminine and it's working. Already, just the stick figure alone is making a huge, huge difference. That is step number one. Step number two, we are gonna add the meat, which is, again, it's adding the muscles. Some people call it adding the contour, the three-dimensional construction. You can call it whatever you want. It's gonna call it something different in every book. I call it the meat just because it's just easier and quicker. So I'm gonna go ahead, I wanna be a little bit more slender with the neck than I was with this guy over here. Real quick, I wanna talk about breasts and how to draw breasts. So I actually learned a really cool tip from someone who I get to call a friend. His name is J. Scott Campbell. He's one of the top comic book artists really of all time. He's just really, really good. And he's kind of known for drawing the ladies, and he can make them look so cute and so beautiful. And he's kind of got this style. He's a comic book artist, but his drawings kind of have a Disney-esque kind of quality to them. And one of the tips that he gave once is really awesome for drawing breasts. And the tip was this: if you can think of the upper torso as kind of a trapezoid, which is kind of a four-sided shape, kind of like so. So this is kind of the small of the waist, and think of this as kind of the shoulders up here. This is the upper part of the torso. What his tip was, if you take this upper trapezoid, if you can divide it into 3 equal areas horizontally, I guess it would be vertically, but going across horizontally, kind of like this. His tip was, when drawing the breasts actually go in this middle area here. All you have to do, you can kind of just draw 2 circles here and here, and that is the placement for the breasts. So here's the problem that most guys have, and this is the funny thing, women are almost always better at drawing breasts than men are, because women have them and they understand how they work. They understand that the breasts are resting on top of the rib cage. So usually whenever you see an amateur male artist draw breasts, they usually have the neck and shoulders and then poof, these giant orbs just like right under the neck right here. But what they kind of fail to realize, there's this area before the breasts start, there's this area of the chest. You need to have this space right here. And I thought this was a really cool tip that J. Scott Campbell gave to kind of keep the breasts in check. So I'm gonna do that with these breasts here, but I'm gonna go ahead and add more contour line around the figure. Here we go. All right, so it's the basic meat of the figure. Now, finally, it's time to do what you usually want to do right from the get-go, add details. You need to wait though. Now that we've got this three-dimensional figure to work with, it's just gonna be a lot easier to add all of the fun details. So I'm gonna have this here. Let's say this is kind of a, I don't know, maybe like a private investigator, some kind of detective or something like that. So I'm gonna give her kind of business attire, but we're gonna have a little bit of fun with it and make it kind of playful. Here we go. So let's say she's got like this butterfly collar. And she's wearing a blazer. So here's the lapel. Now, even though it's form-fitting, we can't just have it like spandex because there needs to be room for all of the folds in the fabric. So one of the things that you can do when you're drawing the folds of the fabric, when you're drawing for comic books or storyboards or just making up anything out of your head, advertising, comps, manga, whatever you're drawing, one of the cool tips that you can do is anytime that you have a fold in the fabric, there's always an area where the fabric is taut and there aren't folds, and then there's an area on the inside where it bunches together. So you can see here, if I pull up my knee like this, you can see my knee here, it's taut against the knee, but then it bunches up behind it like so. So if someone's wearing a jacket, it's gonna bunch up here, but then it's taut where the shoulder is. Where your elbow is, it's gonna be taut, but on the inside, that fabric is gonna bunch up. button. Just get a little more definition going. These legs stand out a little bit better. Sometimes there's a little crease where the this mini skirt is kind of taut, and then this private investigator sometimes gets stuck in some sticky situations, so maybe sometimes she carries a loaded weapon. Real quick, just to help this out a little bit, I'm not gonna completely erase my construction lines, but just to see these details just a little bit better. Now is the really cool part, because right now, this looks great. We got the details in there, but this is kind of just looking like a coloring book. It's just kind of spaghetti lines all over the place. We're going to move now to step number 4, where we are going to add in shadows, and watch how adding in just a little bit of shadow is really going to make this look three-dimensional. So I always like to kind of start from the top and work my way down. Now we want to be careful, because if we put too much shadow, for example, if we put a lot of shadow on the leg, we run the risk, especially with a marker where this either makes a line or doesn't make a line, I could run the risk of making it look like the legs are hairy or dirty or bruised or something like that. And maybe they're not supposed to be. Maybe she hasn't been through a lot of battle action. So we want to be careful with that. But watch what happens if I just do some select cast shadows here and there. So we've got this butterfly collar, and right now we can tell just the way that it's drawn, it's flipped over the top of the lapel of her blazer. But watch what happens if we draw just a little bit of a shadow under here. Little bit of a shadow under here, a little bit under here, a little bit under here. Now, unmistakably, that lapel is definitely flipped over her blazer. Now, the blazer is flipped over too, but the blazer is a little bit more pressed closer to the chest. So we want to be careful not to do too much, but we could add just a little bit there, maybe just a little bit there, just to give that line weight just a little bit of variety. We don't want to go too crazy with it, but you see how even just a little bit helps that out. Now check this out. Right now, the buttons on her blazer, are they buttons or are they circles or are they polka dots that are just silk screened onto the front of her blazer? We don't really know, but watch this. In 2 seconds, 1, 2, unmistakably, wow, just those little drop shadows, those buttons already look like they are pushed through the blazer and holding it together. That is really, really cool. Now, the way that this blazer is overlapping the mini skirt here, we can see that it's doing that, but if we add just a little bit of a drop shadow here, and a little bit of a drop shadow here, now it definitely looks like the blazer is on top. Now, the legs, as I mentioned before, we want to be careful shading in the legs. We could ruin the legs if we don't shade them the right way. Now, if you have a pencil or something that shades evenly, really easily, then you're good to go. But if you're like me, if you've got something like drawing pens or markers, you can't just shade them in. It's going to look like they're hairy, or you could really run into trouble. But some conveniently placed drop shadows, watch what happens. The mini skirt is tauter on this side, so you're not going to see much, but over here, you're going to have this cast shadow where the mini skirt was kind of taut around there, and then over here you're going to have another cast shadow. Doesn't it now look like these legs are tubular, and it's almost like the shadows they're cast onto the legs, making it look like the skirt is kind of taut across the legs, but it also makes it look like the legs are now cylindrical. So there you have it, but there is one more thing that I want to show you guys. Right now this figure is looking good, it's looking three-dimensional, but she's floating in the middle of the white matrix. So I want to add a background, and I want to show how shadows can really lock your character into a 3D environment. So bear with me while I jam through this with y'all. So let's say she is standing on a sidewalk. What I'm going to do, I'm going to have the perspective of the sidewalk, let's say here, here, here. Here's what's cool. Anytime you draw a background, you have an opportunity to use that background to not only make it look like your character standing in the environment, but you can use contrast and perspective and just basic design principles to really make your character pop forward, not just in an illustration sense, but in a design aesthetic. So already, for example, the fact that I have this line going right here, which is the sidewalk going back in perspective, the fact that this line goes here is interrupted by the leg, and then it goes here is interrupted by the leg and continues here. This line by itself already is pushing this character forward. Now a lot of you are probably watching this going, yeah, of course it is, no duh. But you guys don't do this enough. You should really do this more and really think about when you're drawing a background, not just some stuff over here, some stuff over here, but really push things against edges to push things forward. And every time you do something like this, it just adds this really cool design aesthetic. In fact, I'm going to have one of these sidewalk panels purposely go here and then continue on the other side. Wow, that again is already pushing this. I know they're not really matched up, but it's a little wonky, but you guys get the idea. Maybe there's even another one right here. All right, now we've got grass. So you don't have to draw all of the grass here and all of the grass here, but one thing you can do is we've got grass that's on this side of the fence, and the grass is higher than the sidewalk, but the grass has to be random. So we talked about random in some of the other videos. Now the grass has been mowed, so it's all about the same length. It's not exact, because when the lawn gets mowed, the wind is kind of pushing it all in crazy directions, and some blades of grass grow faster than others, so it's not always exact. But anything you can do to try to make it random and have not every blade of grass perfectly, you know, use red since it's what not to do. You don't want your grass perfectly doing this kind of thing. But if you were to look at a close-up of grass, you would probably see like maybe one blade of grass is like this, one blade of grass is like that, another one like this, and then maybe another piece that's just kind of behind it like that, like so. And it's random. There shouldn't be an order to it like that. Then this grass here is closer to us, so I'm going to draw it a little bit larger, and then as it's going back in perspective, objects in the foreground advance and appear larger, objects in the background recede and appear smaller. Then what I'm going to do, instead of drawing all this grass everywhere here, I'm just going to put random tufts of grass. Try to make it as random as I can. And what it's going to do is it's going to look like these are either areas where the grass is a different color, or maybe it's like little pockets or shadows of the grass, or crabgrass, it's growing faster, weeds or something like that. But it's random, so it's just going to help sell it. Here's another cool thing we can do with this grass. These are just random kind of shapes, but what if we put another kind of random shape here? And then what if we continue it over here? Look at that. Isn't that cool where that, again, it's another area where you assume this shape is continuing behind the leg. That's another thing that is pushing this leg forward. A lot of you are like, yeah, I get it. I mean, I can see it's doing that. You need to do this more. This is good, not just good illustration, this is good design, and you should be using it more than you do. All right, there is one more thing, and that is right now the way that she's standing, is she actually standing on this sidewalk or is she actually floating 2 inches above the sidewalk? Right now we don't really know because we can't really see any shadows locking her in. So we need to draw one more shadow. Now there is actually a way you can figure out the exact shadows of anything that you're drawing. If you figure out where your single dominant light source is, which is usually the sun or a light in a room, you figure out 2 things. If you can figure out where that light is, you use the angle of light and the direction of light, and you can figure out exactly where your shadows are. That's kind of a long, complicated process, and you know what? If you want to see this process, I would be more than happy to show you guys, but I need to know that you guys want to see this. I can't make this video just for one person, so if you want to see this, I'm going to take a poll. Let me know down in the comments that you want to see this video of exactly how to do shadows when you're making up characters, drawing comic books, manga, storyboard, all that stuff, and I will show you how to do shadows a little bit more specific and how to make them exact. Right now though, I'm just gonna kind of BS my way through it. I'm gonna show you the quick way of just kind of throwing in some simple shadows. Real quick, we go through these 4 steps: the stick, the meat, the details, and the shadows. And what we're gonna do first, we're gonna draw a quick stick. It's not gonna take anywhere as long as all of this did, but we're gonna imagine if the sunlight is coming from this direction here, like so. This is going to be casting a shadow into the grass. So let's kind of figure this out real quick. Let's start with the stick. We're going to draw lightly. I'm going to draw basically this shape. It's going to be casting back into the grass. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's only 2 rules. For one, objects in the foreground recede and appear smaller. So I'm going to draw a little bit skewed, and I want to make sure the head is a little bit larger, and then, or I'm sorry, a little bit smaller, getting a little bit larger as it comes to the feet. And then the only rule is if she's actually standing on the ground, the feet of her shadow need to be attached to the feet of her actual self. So here we go. So I'm going to draw in, here's my head, my circle. Again, it's skewed because it's in the grass. Here is the jaw underneath, here is the spine, and then again, this is going to be a little bit smaller. Here's the angle of the shoulders right here, here is the angle of the hips right here, and then this is getting a little bit larger. This is kicked out like so, and then here is this right here, and then this one is kind of swinging over like this. Here is that arm, and then here is that arm there. That's the stick. Next up, lightly, we are going to draw the meat. And we don't have to get too crazy with it, but we just want to add just kind of the basic shape of the figure. All right, there we go. Next up, the details. Now for the details, because we only see the silhouette of this shadow, we don't need to draw things like the buttons because you're not going to see that in the shadow. We really just need to think about the silhouette. So the only thing I really need to draw for the details is anything that kind of extends beyond the body. So we might see a little bit more of the collar here. We've got the gun here. Maybe here's the skirt kind of taut across here. Little areas where it's kind of sticking out there. We've got the shoes here. Nothing too crazy. Now for the shadows. Here's what's up. The shadows that are on the ground that's flat, those are really easy. All you're doing is you're kind of drawing in the basic shape of how you see them cast. Use this on this side. And because it's flat ground, very easy. These markers, again, these markers don't shade all that great, so it's going to look a little scribbly. Hopefully you'll get the idea. There's a crack in the sidewalk here, so maybe I'll kind of feel like it's catching a little bit of reflected light on that there. So that's what you're going to do for that. But as the shadow is cast into the grass is all kind of the same height, but it's going to be a little bit more fuzzy, if you will, because there's certain blades of grass that are going to catch light a little bit higher, and then shadows are going to get trapped a little bit lower. So before I shade any of this in, I'm going to go around kind of the edge of my contour, my silhouette, if you will, and I'm just going to kind of draw grass, and I'm going to try to do that random thing where some of the grass is a little bit higher, some is lower, some is kind of turned over to one side, some is kind of curving over this way. Again, without even trying, notice how this shadow right here is going to go against the leg here, continue on this side, and that's just going to help push this leg forward. So the funny thing now, this almost looks like a forensic, like they made a chalk outline, like the person was standing here when they fell over, right? But we haven't put in the rest of the shadow. Now, you could just shade this in, or because this is in the grass, something that might be cool to kind of give it the grassy texture without having to draw the grass everywhere. What if we kind of draw grass and we just, again, we be random, but what if we just kind of use it to fill in the tone so that it's got this really cool, it just feels like a shadow casting into the grass. Now, it's not perfect, and it's kind of funny. Doesn't it almost look like this shadow is pointing, like, hey, you're under arrest, and it's actually pointing to this figure right here? Where did I miss? Oh, whoops! Oh my gosh! No! OCD, that can't happen. Needs to be filled in, shadow. Thank you, James. Is it perfect? No, but unmistakably, this figure is standing on the ground for sure. She's not rising in the air, she's not floating around. And you can see where really quickly, a lot of times people just want to draw the details and they don't want to do the shadows. Taking a little bit of time to add in shadow just adds so much more mood and cinematography and feeling, and it just makes it more evocative, and it also makes it more realistic, like it's taking place in a 3D physical environment. You definitely want to take time to add in the shadows. So that's some basic tips, tricks, and techniques for drawing the female figure. Get to know it, use it, love it, and infuse it into your world.
Did you enjoy class today? If so, give me a like. If there's something you'd like to see me cover in a future video, let me know what that is in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I've also got a video series called Sketchbook Challenge that helps your drawing, creativity, and fill up an awesome looking sketchbook. Plus, there are videos on You Can Draw Star Wars, Hollywood is Dead, and sneak peeks at the Aladdin 3477 motion picture trilogy. In order to not miss any new videos, hit that notification bell. Sharing is caring, and it's great to inspire your friends. Share this video on social media and your friends will share awesome art tips they find with you. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Matt_Busch_Instagram. I'll see you back in the classroom soon. Don't be tardy.